Hey, everybody, and welcome to AI Impacts. Today, we're chatting with Stephanie Lynch. Stephanie Lynch is a veteran marketer in the technology world, and particularly in the blockchain space. Currently, she's a senior partner of Braver Element, which is a consultancy and fractional CMO. I think that's fair. And then has a long history of running marketing teams at a handful of other companies. Welcome to AI Impacts, Stephanie.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Dean.
Welcome.
Yeah. So we'd love to just kind of jump in, getting a kind of little bit of background about what your overall experience has been with AI since it's come, since the big boom about a year ago.
So I guess about a year ago when ChatGPT 3 was available, I immediately started using it and working with it. And at the time, the company that I was working with and the colleagues that I worked with, I started to realize that people were using it, but they weren't going to share or talk about the fact that they were using it, right? That there is something of it's kind of like having a mystery in the box. At the same time, it's like having your own junior assistant, right? So you don't necessarily want to share that you're using the junior assistant. Yeah. You want people to think that all the work is your own. And so immediately what I did is I started sharing. I'm using it. This is how I used it. See how I used it? And asking people to share when they used it and how, what the prompt was and, what results that you got so that we could start leveling that. It wasn't basically what I'm saying is that in certain instances, I think at first people were still a little trepidatious, right? That, you really have to create a culture of reward. Like basically I was rewarding people for using it. You really have to do that. Otherwise, you don't know when people are using it or not. I was talking to a friend recently who works for a global agency. They're part of a holding company. I will not name them, but they're a very big agency. And she told me, hey, we're not allowed to use it. And she really doesn't know anything about it. She's probably used ChatGPT, the free version, maybe a couple of times just to see what it did.
I'm still amazed people haven't used this, but
yeah, it is fascinating. I think I saw a stat recently. It was like 7% of Americans use ChatGPT every day. But don't quote me on that. I mean, I can look up later. I can look it up later so I can share it for you, share it with you for the show notes. But the point that I really wanted to make in terms of the culture and rewarding people for using it and not punishing them, and going back to my friend, is that she basically said, no, we're not allowed to use it. And I just started laughing and I was like, people are using it. People are using it, especially because they do a lot of copywriting. And she said, oh, well, it's banned on, from the server. And I was like, do people have mobile phones? And I was like, they're using not the Wi-Fi. They're just using their cellular plan. They're putting the phone under their desk and they're using it.
Yeah.
Your junior 100%. People are using it.
100%. Or in this case, you could even take a picture of the screen now and just say solve this for me. Yeah. How do I respond to this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
We've had it. I've invited somebody to be a guest on this podcast who I think would be a fantastic guest because they're a copywriter and they use ChatGPT extensively, but not for actually writing copy. I mean, I'm a copywriter and I don't really use it for writing copy. I use it for ideas. I use it to sort of give inspiration, things like that, to check things. But they won't come on because they don't want their bosses to know how much they use ChatGPT. Yeah. And it's like, come on, the cat's out the bag, guys. Let's embrace this technology.
It really is interesting, Dean, in the sense of it's a great leveler. There's a great essay that you've probably read by Ethan Mollick about this concept of leveling, that it allows people who aren't very good at, say, writing to level up and be as good as a really good expert, as a master. And I personally see that as a positive, not because I necessarily think about it as like democratization of knowledge, which is definitely an aspect of that, but also because I think that it's going to pull everybody up. Sure. I just saw some research actually today or maybe yesterday about how ChatGPT or, these LLMs, they're not necessarily as helpful for experts. So people who really do have mastery in an area, they don't necessarily help them. Like there's not as big of a boost for someone who's really good at something. The boost is for someone who is not very good at something. But I think that if you especially if you work in knowledge work, like I do, and you have an area of expertise, what it does is it allows you to tap into all these other knowledge areas so that you can come up with new and even more innovative and creative ways to see the world. Not because it gives you the ideas. It doesn't. It just gives you the information. And so if you are a really creative thinker, harnessing that information and then being able to look at it and reframe it in new ways allows you to create really unusual and interesting things.
Yeah, I mean, we've found that too with some of our own uses of it, just Dean and I discussing, where it gets you like 90% of the way across most domains that you need, right? Like if you don't know how to do something, you can ask for it. Like I needed to put together stuff for a job board design that I'm working on. I'm like, what are the typical questions that get asked? And here they are, right? But for my own work, where I'm trying to do something that is sort of within my own kind of craft, I find I'm spending more of my time trying to tell the bot what all the context is, right? Yes. Relative to, so, it gets to the point where it's like, what's the lift here that I'm actually doing, and how much am I actually getting out of this?
And that's the same for me when it comes to copywriting. It's like I say, I'll use ChatGPT quite a lot for ideas, for headline suggestions as well. Sometimes I'm writing a blog or something just to give me some, things that I would normally like brainstorm. I don't know if we can still say thought shower. So things that I would normally try to like come up with loads of different ideas and use them as like, stimulus for other potential ideas. I can use ChatGPT that's really effective for that. And then it sets my brain thinking about other things. But for actual copywriting, I just find it more frustrating than anything. I have to go through and like put it into my voice or set up the prompt to set up the custom GPT. It take too long to set it up. I can write that stuff way quicker. But like you say, that's because that's my domain. So if there was somebody who, certainly when we had Chris on the previous 2 podcasts ago, Chris was saying that it really helps him produce copy. And that's because he's not great at that. He doesn't have a skill at that. He's also dyslexic. So it really, really helps him with that. And I totally appreciate that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Stephanie, one question I have for you, when you were, especially at the onset of our conversation, you're talking about how you're very open about using the GPT when it came out, and your reference to it as if using a junior employee, right? I think that there's a power dynamic there when it comes to actually being willing to say that you're using it as well, right? Like some of the guests that we've asked to come on, generally speaking, as they are newer in their career, younger in their career, they're less likely to say that they're using these things. Whereas when, if you're a director or higher, seems to be like, no, all of a sudden I'm innovative, right? Because I'm using this thing. So have you experienced that or kind of rub up against that issue at all in discussing it with colleagues and things?
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it in that way, George. And I can definitely understand that. I think it's because, look, if you have an expertise in an area, right? I have 15, 20 years of experience in a thing, then I don't feel it's not as big of a risk for me to say, oh, and I use AI for XYZ. I use AI for market research. I think what's really important, and I would say this to junior people, is to help people understand that you're using it for information gathering, but you're not using it for creativity. I mean, I would say, and it goes back to what Dean was talking about from a copywriting perspective, I have yet to really get it to create something truly innovative. That comes from me. It's just giving me more information that helps me get to a creative idea. And in fact, I was just working on a project earlier today, and one of the very simple use cases, I mean, this is so simple, of what I love to use it for is synonyms and context. Right? That I can ask for 100 words within a specific context. So give me 100 words that mean scaffolding within the context of building upon ideas. And then it'll give me 100 words. And I actually think what's really cool then is if you can take it and say, okay, thanks for the 100 words. These are the 3 I really liked. Now give me those words as if you were a comedian or as if you were trying to be funny. And so then it'll give me some more words. And then you get into some really interesting territories. And so I can lift one of those words and then I can start to really reframe it and think about, okay, I really like this word. I like the concept around it. So I'm going to, use it in this way, and I'm going to build a graphic around it in this way.
And that's something that would have taken teams of people to sit around in a room and discuss and have whiteboards and all sorts of stuff before. But now, we've got the power to do that just, at the click of a few buttons.
Yes. But even when it comes to like building taglines and things, like I've never seen it give me a good tagline ever.
No.
Ever. No matter how much context I give it. But it helps me find words. And then I can put those together in really fun and meaningful ways because I have the strategy. And yes, I'm giving it some context, but I just see it as it's kind of like having a screwdriver when you've only used a hammer. So now you have a hammer and a screwdriver, and you can use both of those things to make just amazing projects. But like, you could still build the project even if you didn't have the screwdriver. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And I think that's something which a lot of people who haven't experimented with using, generative AIs, or a lot of people who maybe are reluctant technologists necessarily, they have a misunderstanding of what AI is. So they think that AI potentially is some robot that is going to replace them, that is like autonomous, that is coming out with all these ideas. And I think that misunderstanding is part of what causes the sort of reluctance, the fear, this hidden aspect of AI where people like to keep it behind closed doors, when actually it's just a tool. It's just a tool that's only as good as the person using it. You need to be a skilled AI user to elicit the correct responses.
I think that's really interesting. I think I'm sorry, George.
No, please go ahead.
I was just thinking that that's sort of insightful. It goes back to us talking about junior people, that perhaps people are afraid to talk about it and to be open about usage because it's sort of in their mind, they're panicking that it could replace them. I don't think it can replace me. I really don't.
Yeah.
I'm going to be totally honest. I don't see how it could replace me. I mean, not now, right? Like it can't replace what I can do, because ultimately, for the most part today, unless you're a developer and you've got workflow, and we can talk about that, but like you have like really specific workflows, it doesn't make anything. You make it. You make the thing. And so until it can really make what I can make from start to finish, I don't really have any fears around it at all.
Right. I mean, there's too many things that, like on a typical workflow, let's say we're just putting a proposal together, right? There's too many factors that go into considerations that of the specific wording based on something that was discussed in a meeting or whatever. Like there's too many inputs and sources at the moment that are not present, right? Like it almost seems like now the human's job is to do type, copy, paste, right? Like that's a big workflow now of just copying things in and out of chatbots. And we've had other discussions about different ways of interfacing with these things, but for the 7% of America that actually is using these things, but 95% of them or whatever are using ChatGPT, right? And they're pasting stuff in and out. And the thing that's funny to me about the like kind of like either whether it's junior person or someone that's like more of a direct contributor to just independently working on a project, is that I think that replacement feeling is that someone else is just going to go, well, just tell me the steps that you did and you don't have to show up next week. But in reality, like to your point, all the actual ideation about and decision-making about how to structure something or what to talk about is not necessarily coming from that. Or if it is, it's in a different chat thread and someone has to tell it, this is the decision we're making to go with. Like this is the actual curation that the human's doing before it just outputs everything.
Yeah, I think, again, I think that's very insightful in the sense of all we're doing right now is copying and pasting input output. I don't disagree for the most part, right? If you're a non-dev. I mean, I was looking at some tools recently in terms of thinking about workflow, like getting away from just simple input output or, copy-based methods. Really thinking about how I could use it as a virtual assistant and how I can develop like my own application. Mind Studio has some really interesting tools. I don't know if you've ever looked at that particular platform. There's others in the space. I thought
Mind Studio.
Mind Studio. I thought that one was really interesting. They've got a bunch of YouTube videos and webinars. And just the reason why I hit on this one is because it's no to little code, right? I'm not a developer. I do not code. Granted, with the help of, LLMs, perhaps I could code, with some natural language inputs and they give me code on the output. Although I have tried that with in Google in terms of getting their applications to basically to code them and do things. And I sometimes get really hung up on that, even with help from AI. So anyway, back to Mind Studio, that it's really interesting the things that you can build with it in the sense of, let's say you want to build it's basically like a mini app or a mini GPT that when you put in a specific input, it will give you a templated output. Like basically you can create really interesting workflow, not because it's necessary. Mind Studio is a workflow platform. It is an application platform. So it'll allow you to create these applications kind of drag and drop with almost no code. And so that has been really interesting to me, especially because you can create a GPT and embed it on your website. There's another tool that I played around with a little bit because, again, it's fairly low tech, right? I'm not trying to get people to think I'm more techie than I am, because I know a little bit. But Cassidy is another platform I think that's really interesting. And what that can do is you basically build your own knowledge base. And then it will reference that knowledge base for you. And you can create workflow in that too. So right now I've just been testing it to see how good it can ping my knowledge base. So I can connect it to my Google Workspace. It can access my files. And then, just testing it to see, hey, can it give me the answers that I need? Yeah. You give it some context, right? There's some few things that you do just to give it some context so that it understands what it's supposed to be doing. It's pretty good. The issue with that one is that there's a little bit of a lag or delay. So if you put files in like today, it's not going to be able to reference them. At least gotcha. I wasn't able to get I could notice that there was sort of a time lag or a delay, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. And then also like there's limitations and caps in the knowledge base. So you pay, right? If your knowledge base is quite large, then you're going to pay more money for the platform. But that one I think is really interesting in terms of, stepping it up a notch. Again, like just getting away from that simple input output, like give me some copy. Yeah. In terms of, hey, what can I get it to do as a small business, right? Like I'm not enterprise business with 100 employees. What are some, different applications and platforms that I can use to experiment a little bit more? And so I think that one's really interesting. They have a couple of competitors in their set, but I've been playing around with that one. It's called Cassidy, Cassidy. Okay. So Mind Studio and Cassidy are the tools that I've been looking at because they're low to no code. They're pretty simple. And I know that there are competitors in their set. I just happen to choose those to test.
Yeah. So is this one of the platforms that you built your kind of virtual business partner with? You had mentioned in a previous conversation that you had kind of built a bot, so to speak, to kind of help you make decisions from a business perspective.
Yeah, I mean, mostly I've started to experiment in testing all those platforms. So Cassidy, as well as Gemini. I have Gemini Pro, which actually I sort of have a rant about that Google sells you the Pro account. But from my perspective as a user, I don't get access to any of the features and benefits that they promote. I've been on with Google customer service for hours to try to figure this out. And all they tell me is it'll roll out to you soon. But I've been paying for it for months. But I don't have the full functionality of the platform. So it doesn't actually access my drive. It's not integrated into Sheets. It's not integrated into Slides. I have like very limited access, and I have no idea why. Like I said, I've been on support, like with support for hours, and the only thing they can tell me is it's rolling out slowly.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, okay, well, I don't live on the East or the West Coast, so maybe that's it's a regional issue, but it really bothers me that I pay the price, but I don't get the full functionality. Anyway, but I am testing it. End of rant. I am testing. Sure. I am testing it as well as with ChatGPT, and I did test Claude I was on Claude for several months and paid for the pro account, and I like it. And I do think it's, good copywriter, and you'll see when you compare the LLMs online, they talk about that, Claude is a great copywriter, especially with the latest version, its latest LLM version. But I kind of prefer just straight up Gemini. It's kind of like the Swiss Army knife for me. If I'm going to do a lot of data analysis, I'll switch to ChatGPT because I think it does it better. It just handles the data analysis a little bit better. But for just sort of all-purpose use, it would be Gemini. And then, like I said, I've been trying to give all of these platforms context, to give them context about the virtual assistant. And I have names for them, and I refer to them, just to sort of test the boundaries. I guess I should tell you background that I was a Google Glass beta tester back, what was that, over 10 years ago. And I was also, I was a Google Glass beta tester. I was a YouTube pre-roll tester. So the agents that I worked with, we had a very large client that ran a lot of YouTube. And, so I beta tested the pre-roll platform before it was launched. And we did some specialty campaigns with Google. I was also an early adopter of Facebook advertising. So I think that for me, being able to stay sort of on the, I'm not going to say bleeding edge, but on the cutting edge of technology has always been really, really important to me.
Can we have a slight aside? I'm just curious about Google Glass. What was it actually like? I never tried it.
I thought it was pretty cool, actually. It's just that at that time, especially culturally, you would go somewhere and people would be like, what are you doing? It really worked it worked very similarly to Ray-Ban's Facebook glasses. It had the camera feature built right in, and you could take pictures with it, and it would sync to the Google Cloud, their photo cloud.
Sure. There was no heads up display or anything on it though, right? That was
no.
Yeah. Okay. That was the thing that was always, I should have imagined them showing you the ad. You turn it on, it says features are going to be rolled out soon. Just hovering in front of you everywhere. But I remember that was one of the promotional videos. Was there this futuristic idea?
I thought there was. I thought they had. Yeah, I thought they had that.
Something. Well, now that I remember back, I think there was a video screen, but it wasn't invasive, in my opinion.
Interesting.
I think the issue was that there just wasn't enough application for usage. It was it takes pictures.
Right. In a semi-creepy way at the time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas
it's the early, it's like any early wearable technology, right? Like early smartwatches just did not get adoption. They were pretty cool and everything like that. I had one, I tried it out and stuff, but then all of a sudden when they get really commoditized with the Apple Watch, then all of a sudden everything hits the sweet spot. The resolution on the watch is great, the connectivity is great, the feature set's great, all the apps are there, and bang, it just takes off. And I think it's going to be the same with all sorts of wearables.
I totally agree. I think that that's the case, though, that now that we have AI and the ability and the need, well, maybe I should not necessarily the need. I'm not sure that's the right term, but the desire to record conversation and to be able to access it later and to pull summaries and insights from that conversation. I think that makes those wearables way more interesting and with a lot more use case to them besides just taking pictures or referencing your phone in some way. So I bought the limitless pendant when it launched its promotional campaign, I don't know, a month ago or so. And I bought it I mean, it was cheap. It's like $99. And I thought, well, I'll test it. For
What
right
did you
now,
think?
the limit, they don't come out until July, and then they'll send the pendants, and they just like
Gotcha.
clip.
I was gonna say, I don't see you wearing it, so maybe it wasn't successful yet.
No,
but.
I haven't gotten it yet. They're supposed to ship them in July. I have been testing the Limitless app. I don't think it's as useful as, say, Otter for recording, voice. I came across another application today called Time OS that looks really interesting. It's similar to this other application. I can't think of the name of it. I want to call it Movement, but I know that's wrong. It starts with an M. But it looks at your calendar, and then it will plot out the best times for tasks.
Oh, Motion.
Yes. Yeah, it's a competitor
George
of
loves Motion.
Yeah,
it's a competitor. George, you got to look at Time OS. The reason why I point it out is because it seems to have a little bit more functionality than Motion, and that the thing that really got me, which, I mean, if I knew their product marketer, I would be like, hey, you should test this one feature, like in terms of like how you're promoting and marketing the application. And that feature was to be able to talk into your phone at any time, and it records and then serves up your insights. The way it was described on the website, it actually really hooked me, even though I know there are plenty of other applications that do this.
Yeah.
The way they described it and that feature within the rest of the feature stack was enough to make me think, I'll test this.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I've been using Motion mostly just since launching the business to just keep track of actually putting things on my calendar that I need to do. So I sort of tell it, like, here's my day. It's much like I kind of describe it as like a very crappy Asana. Like, it doesn't really have like the bells and whistles or like the project management skills, but it has like, here's a list in your projects and that kind of thing. And then the real feature they sell is this reorganization. They're calling it AI. I don't know how much AI is really there, because it's clearly not reading what the tasks are or doing any sort of analysis on like what kinds of things I do at different times of the day. It's purely reorganizing the calendar. But in any event, it seems to work enough. But going into it, I knew I'm going to load up my projects on this thing, and I'm going to be on this platform longer than I want to, because of this big hook of like that project management thing. And I hope that they were rolling out more features, and I really haven't. So I might have to look at the other options out there, or just kind of, speaking of Asana, just wait for them to catch up with the same thing. Which seems like a lot of these products, I'm like, how much of these are really products versus features that are going to be gobbled up, or that's the point. They're trying to be bought and absorbed into another application. Like some of them, they look very similar to some of them, where they're like, the CSS lift would be light to even move this thing into an app. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I think we're going to... Sorry. Go for it, Stephanie.
No, you go, Dean.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, right, I'll go for it.
Yeah, you go. I want to hear what you have to say.
I think what I was going to say, actually, was that as with all these technologies, these nascent technologies, then with everything, there becomes this consolidation, this sort of homogenization or whatever of all the different features, and we're seeing that already start to happen, but I think we're going to see that accelerate so much, so that various different aspects of things that we're calling AI or machine learning or that type of aspects of other sort of technologies, they're all going to start to coalesce in these solutions, much like you've seen with Google, with anything. It brings these things, bring everything together, and I think this is something going back to what you said about 7% of Americans have used AI. So we're still in this incredibly early adopter stage. To us, it doesn't, certainly to me, it doesn't feel like I'm an early adopter. Especially not when we have these conversations with people who've been using AI for years. You think about like Matt and Awanke, people like that have been using it for a long, long time. But actually, we're still really real at the early stages of this. So I expect to see it all coalesce.
I don't disagree. I'm trying to remember the stat. I do believe that it was 7% have use AI every day. I thought it was like 34% of Americans have actually used it.
I saw something about 12% the other day. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was it was a low figure that was showing that despite all the hype, a lot of people aren't using.
This seems like a good opportunity to use AI to try to figure this out. So
yes,
I'm going to pull
George,
up Perplexity here.
Do it. Bring it up. Bring it up.
Okay,
I was looking too, but I couldn't find the right stat. But especially because the Pew Research study that I found was in 2022. And I know there's more recent information. Here he goes with Perplexity.
Yeah, here we go. We'll say how many Americans have used, should we say AI or ChatGPT?
AI.
AI, okay.
I think,
and by the way, this is Perplexity, which Stephanie, I believe you've used and had mentioned at one point.
Yeah, I like Perplexity for market research. There it is. There's the Pew Research study, but it's a little dated.
It's a little dated.
Especially because if people understand that Alexa is AI, then I think that sort of broadens the AI space. The Google summaries are interesting too. They're like a hot political topic.
They are.
So many people have
glue.
Yeah, with the pizza and glue. Let's see. 81%.
Okay. 53% have okay, over half have used it.
Okay. Over half have used it.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, these numbers are all over the place. So this is probably, I mean, it's probably hard to even get solid data on this kind of thing because it's changing so frequently.
I imagine so.
I think that's really true. I was going to say that
the 7% sounds more.
7%.
It does sound more likely.
Well, that 7% I thought was, uses it every day. But
Sure.
I did want to say something else coming out with Perplexity I think is really interesting. And I hope to see more of this concept in other use cases for AI and with ChatGPT and with Gemini, for example, in creating collections. At first, on Perplexity, I thought, who cares about the collections? Like, I'll just make a zillion threads. It's like a new input for every question. Mm-hmm. And then I started to realize the benefits of using the collections because you can lose your threads. It's, you can forget like what question you asked, and then you're like scrolling through like 100 threads. And the collections are really interesting, especially if you're like referencing a specific topic, or if you have a client, for example. I kind of will put all of the questions under the client's name for anything that I might tackle for that particular client, or if it's just a general topic. Then I'll create the topic as a collection, and then I can put all those threads in there. And then when I'm on the mobile app, it's just a lot easier to find. Right, I can just go right to collections, and I can find the thread or the questions that I had asked before.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Really interesting. I think what really bothers me about my use in these GPTs or in these LLM interfaces, these chat interfaces, is that it's really difficult to create. You can't create folders and nest things within the folders.
Yeah.
There's no, what do you call that? Organization.
Hierarchy.
Yeah.
So
there's no
structure.
Yeah, there's a structure. And I find that to be like kind of annoying.
It's a pain.
Yeah, it's pain.
Yeah, it is
so
a pain. You've just got to list like a menu on the side. You've got to scroll through. And where did I ask that question again?
Right.
What
or even worse, when did I ask this question?
Yeah, when did I ask it?
Right. Was it November that I was curious about this? It's like very difficult to pull stuff up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and from that vantage point, I think that if we think about second brain use cases, that the organizational structure may not be that necessary.
Yeah.
However, for now, you can't search through your threads. You can't search through your chats. That I think would be amazing, because then you could just remove the aspect of organization and like really rethink what organization means now that the neural network would be in place for all of the information that you're gathering. There was another tool that I came across. I think they've really just launched their promotional, they're flexing their promotional muscle right now. It's called IKI, I-K-I. I think
Icky.
Let's see. Wiki, but without the W.
Okay.
I think it's IKI.ai. And it's the closest that I've seen that kind of blends this search function with second brain mental, kind of mind mapping. I thought it was really interesting. I haven't fully tested it, to be fair. But I was really like doing a deep dive on their site and kind of was chatting with a colleague about it. I think that I'd like to see more in this space. I'd like to see more applications in this space in terms of how to rethink the structure of knowledge gathering. Mm-hmm. What does that look like, and how can you implement it into your business?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because if you think about it, we're still using like ancient systems that have just been mapped onto computers. Right. You know, it's we're not doing anything. We've not been doing anything necessarily new. We've just been. It's just a mirror of what happens in the real world, kind of how it happens. Yeah, that is interesting. Actually, that's something I'd never even considered the notion of knowledge storing and access.
Yeah. So as we're kind of winding down here, I want to move us on to some unexpected outcomes that you've experienced while using AI over the past, say, I guess it's been about a year since this whole revolution, for lack of a better term, has taken place. So, so what are some of the big kind of unexpected things that you realized about using these tools?
I don't know that I have any like funny stories like, oh, it gave me something funny, because I kind of like that. Like, I don't think of that as unexpected. Like the hallucinations or whatever, I find that to be like kind of, it's the AI equivalent of human error, and human error can be actually very funny. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of like it when it makes weird suggestions or things, because it almost makes me feel like it's more human, because it makes these weirdnesses. I think the unexpected outcome for me was how useful it would be to me. And I think that at first I was a little concerned that I would use it too much as like a crutch. If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because it's a shorthand to get you to an endpoint. But now the unexpected outcome is that I see it as like helping me make more. Not because it necessarily increases my productivity, which I guess would be an outcome of that, but because it broadens like I mentioned earlier, broadens this sort of knowledge landscape for me. So while I'm reading a book, I can immediately go under Perplexity and find out more about the author or other books or any kind of literature that's being explained in the book. I can like quickly reference it and get a summary, and I can even get more details. So sometimes, speaking of mind mapping, that I'll be reading a book and I'll get so involved in the sort of the secondary learning and like the whatever that was in the book that like I'll be on that for 30 minutes. And then I go back to the book and I'm like, where was I? I don't even remember.
So do you find that it's that's replaced, say, Google or something that maybe you were using before? Would you still use Google at all, or how do they work together?
It's a good question. I definitely don't use Google as much now that I have Perplexity. I use them both. But I don't know. I guess, again, you'd think like, oh, well, maybe this replaces books. Actually, it's gotten me more invested in books, because now I can go so much deeper with the book so much faster. So, right, like when I was in graduate school, you were just trying to like intake as much information as possible. Like you're just like reading all these books till your mind's gonna like, turns into putty. And the only way to get deeper into an area of expertise or into an author's knowledge was just to keep going back to the library, getting academic journal articles, and you would have to try to lay out that interrelationship. Mm-hmm. But now it's just so much faster and easier that I can instantly figure out, oh, this author I'm reading studies at this university with this professor, and they've done this other research. It's just mind-blowingly fast.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I love it. It's so great.
I think I need that to help me get through James Joyce Ulysses.
Yes, absolutely.
I think I need something like that, because every time I try it, I'm just like, I don't even know. I need to read around this. I need somebody to tell me what's actually happening in this story. Maybe that's what I need to do.
That's interesting. I mean, it's funny you say I feel like a little bit of a slacker, because you're saying that you're doing this for your 50 books a year, but I find myself doing a similar thing for like historical documentaries and things, where I'll be like, they mentioned this random thing that happened. Like, tell me what that is in 3 paragraphs, you know, and you get a lot of to your point, like the context of like, well, to understand it, you actually have to understand this thing first, and we'll give you 3 sentences on that. And I use Perplexity for a lot of that, because I find that it's like, if I want more information, I want to be able to drill in on the source instead of just kind of be told it via the chatbot or whatever. But that's interesting.
Yeah.
So one thing I'd like to know, first of all, before we crack on, is how does using AI make you feel?
Well, I'm going to say how I think other people talk about it, because that's, the original feeling I got was that AI is a de-risker. It de-risks what you bring into the world, because you can double check it, right? Like, I can write something and I can double check it and be like, does this pass muster, basically? And actually, one of the use cases that I use with my son is I have him plug in the rubric for his class, and then he plugs in the essay, and it'll tell him what the score is. And it's 99% accurate. Like, if he's going to get a B, because they say he's going to get a B, he gets a B. Absolutely.
Is the teacher using it?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Right? Who knows? But I think that what I like about that is that, yes, it kind of de-risks. It makes you feel, so from that aspect, it makes you feel braver, right? I think it gives you more courage to say things that you might not necessarily have said before, because it gives you the copy, right? We're back to the input output. But I think now what it makes me feel is more empowered, because with workflow and other ways of utilizing it, I find that it's less about efficiency and de-risking, and it's more about helping me make, like, what more can I make?
And I think the key is it's not about knowing the information, it's about knowing how to find information. I think nowadays, especially more so with AI, having those skills to be able to interrogate systems, to be able to think, what do I actually need to know, and then going out to find that, as opposed to learning a blanket like load of information and having the ability to recall the vital pieces of it at the right time. It's actually understanding what type of knowledge do I need? What should I need? What might help me in this situation? How do I go and find that? How do I solve this specific problem? How do I think a bit more laterally, maybe, and open up other possibilities and stimulate my mind to find other information that might also help?
I totally agree with you.
Stephanie, one final question for you before we wrap up. What is an AI tip that you have for someone who is coming up and trying to get into your role? Or maybe not your specific role, but a similar role to yours.
Well, let me think about that just a little bit, because it's like, I could say that if you were trying to build your own business, like start your own business, that there are like things I would tell you to do. And then if you were trying to get, to become a marketing strategist, I think there are things that I would tell you to do. I guess ultimately I might go back to first principles, in the sense of, it's really important to document your process. And I think that's going to become more and more critical as AI becomes more ubiquitous and more ingrained in what we make and what we build and what we sell. And by that, I mean that, like, I have a very specific process about how I make what I make. And I have workflow, I have checklists for onboarding clients. I, have steps that I take them through. Milestones. There's my organizational architecture in terms of all my files and how I place things is very, very specific. But the reason why I'm saying document all of the process every process. When you make something, create that process, because once, again, AI becomes a lot more ubiquitous, then if you have that process documented, it's much easier for you to train the AI to understand how you do what you do so that you can implement workflow.
Yes,
not to say that you remove people, it's that then you implement workflow so you can spend more time on coming up with novelty and less time on doing administrative work. Because I truly believe that it is novelty that is what is going to be paramount, just so critical in what we do moving forward. I definitely see the difference in companies that are just using AI to generate copy, largely because they're also using AI to generate strategy. Mm-hmm. And because they're doing that, it's just a sea of sameness. It's like they all start to look and sound the same. That goes back to de-risking. Most AI applications, if you really look and if you really read what they're saying, it's all about productivity or de-risking. That's it. I don't feel like that's the human impact for most brands. Even in the AI space, I think that if they dug a little bit deeper, they would see more and additional impacts. And I think they're all circling around productivity, efficiency, and de-risking because that's what they're all getting from the same bot.
Yeah, it's true. That's great advice. So being able to have all of your process, to be able to train any future model that may be helping you in a job is going to only reduce the amount of time you have to build all that context that we've talked about to get any reasonable workflow response back from these
And I think just in general in life, right? If you don't understand and document your processes fully, how are you going to know if you're doing them at the optimum levels? How are you going to know how to possibly change them and tweak them?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I manage teams internally, one of the things that I used to tell my teammates was, look, you're very good at a thing. Like you're a really good copywriter. You're a great designer. You're a good strategist. You're a good researcher. You're a good data analyst. That's great. And you can become a better and better skilled tradesman in that area. But if you want to lead, you have to understand how you make the work. And that's operations. It doesn't mean that you'll be, COO. That's not what I'm saying. But if you don't understand how to operationalize the work, you can't lead. And if you want to lead, learn operations. And it's the same thing with leading yourself, right? Like if you understand how you make what you do, it's not even that you're leading your business forward, but that also means that you can train someone else. If you don't know how you make your work, how can you train someone else to come in and help you?
Right. That's totally true. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think we're just about time to wrap up here. I want to just say thank you so much for joining us, Stephanie. This has been another great conversation on the AI Impacts podcast. So thank you so much. Thanks everybody for listening to this episode. You can find us. Yeah.
I was going to say, Stephanie, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, or find you on any socials or anything like that, is there any way they can do that?
Sure. So they can hit me up. My email address is stephanie@braverelement.com. And they can check out my website at braverelement.com, or they can hit me up on LinkedIn. The handle is S.Lynch. So if you just do a search for Slynch, you'll find me on LinkedIn. I am working on launching an Instagram account, but it's not ready yet. So stay tuned for that.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Yes. And if you want to follow the podcast, be sure to follow us on YouTube, where you can watch, hit like, subscribe, smash all the buttons. And yeah, thanks so much again. Thank you, Stephanie.
Bye, guys. Cheers. It was a real pleasure. It was awesome.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.